This is the fifth book in a series called The Horror Story Volumes. So this is Horror Story Volume 5, entitled The Hangman's Ghost. It was written by G.M.Hague and narrated by the author, myself, G.M.Hague. While I call these horror story volumes a series, they are standalone books and you don't have to read them in any chronological or numerical order. I'm an Australian author, and my novels, unless it's otherwise really obvious, are by default set in Australia and populated by Australian characters. I'll also point out that I'm fortunate to live in the southwest countryside of Western Australia, along with my beautiful wife Lisa, 3 Great Danes, 2 donkeys, and a tremendous amount of wildlife that has absolutely no regard for anyone trying to record an audiobook in my studio. Despite my best efforts to avoid it, you may still occasionally hear very faint bird noises in the background. I've tried recording at night, but then you just get the frogs. These noises are almost inaudible and don't impact on the quality of the recording, but using some listening devices, you may just hear 1 or 2. Author's Introduction to The Hangman's Ghost. The idea behind this story was inspired by a 1960s movie, of which I only caught the last few minutes, where the bad guy finally gets what's coming to him and is hanged for his crimes. Regardless of your opinions on capital punishment or how deserved the execution may be, you might agree it's a fairly macabre process, and I began to think that any appointed hangman, given the horror and intense fears experienced in those moments, could be very prone to enduring the ghosts of the condemned prisoners, of being haunted by the men and women they've hung, especially if any of those were innocent or victims of misplaced justice. Within our understanding of all things supernatural, ghosts and evil demons, you'd expect a hangman would be easy pickings for any unhappy spirits. I want to point out that I didn't research the finer details of how condemned prisoners were hanged in the late 1940s. This tale is entirely fiction, as you'd expect of a ghost story, and of course none of these people or places exists. However, if you have any doubts about the presence of ghosts in an old prison, next time you're in Western Australia, take a tour of the old Fremantle prison. It ran for 133 years and saw the hangings of over 40 people, the last one a serial killer in 1964. These days, the prison runs torchlight tours in the middle of the night. Nope, you won't see me there, not a chance in hell, but don't be surprised about anything you do see. Lots of very unhappy, angry and unpleasant people die in jails. It makes sense they would stick around afterwards. They've only got one other place to go, and nobody wants to go there. Chapter 1. Jacob Good was a man who could expect to see many ghosts. Angry spirits and the wraiths of men and women filled with hate for Jacob, parading their soured souls in front of him, surrounding Jacob with their rage. After all, Jacob had killed a lot of people. He was good at killing people, quickly and without any fuss or compassion. Efficiently, many people said, as if that might relieve their own guilt, although they were never called upon to pull the lever themselves. As the principal hangman at Willengarten Prison, it was Jacob's responsibility to dispatch the condemned prisoners to the next world, with as little pain and emotional distress as possible. The government-sanctioned killing wasn't about revenge. There was no need to inflict suffering. A hanging was a practical punishment for criminals who forfeited the right to their own life through a heinous act. It was only proper these prisoners be put to death, but in this modern age, 1949, with the horrors of the Second World War still fresh in everyone's mind, a humane, competent execution was the best method, and Jacob was an expert at hanging criminals. Today's execution was no different to many others, despite that this would be his second-last client, as he preferred to call the condemned prisoners. Only one more after this, scheduled in 2 weeks' time. Then Jacob was retiring from a long and respected career, if being a hangman could be called such a thing. Jacob was only 50 years old and still a stout, powerful man, but the authorities insisted that an official in Jacob's position must be capable.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?